Now, God was necessary for Whitehead's universe. This quote-unquote God is not a typical conception of God. It is not omnipotent, it is not omnibenevolent, and it does not desire a following like the monotheistic gods do. Whitehead was highly critical of the Christian God. He did not like that its most important attribute was power, and that its highest desire was to be followed. Omnipotence is not possible in Whitehead's universe. Whitehead's God does not create nor coerce reality, but rather he maintains the order of reality by conditioning it. As I said, the inner societies affect the outer societies, and thus Whitehead's God is necessarily affected by the inner societies. He is not beyond them. For if he were to break free from their causation, as the Christian God does, he would break the chain of causality, thus collapsing the universe and ceasing to exist himself, for he is simply all experiences drawn into one cosmic consciousness. The relationship between God and the universe is analogous to the relationship between humans and their body. We humans can condition our body by, consuming something, exercising, etc., but we cannot entirely coerce the individual organs, cells, and molecules to do what we please. The universe is God's body, and he can condition it, but not coerce it. In summary, Whitehead's system necessitates God because A, all societies are sentient, and the universe itself is a society, and B, since Whitehead's metaphysics collapses the notion of laws of nature via asserting that all processes have subjective aim, there must be some ultimate process that values the order of the cosmos and conditions it. Now, there is a dual nature to this God. There is the consequent nature of God and the primordial nature of God. The consequent nature of God is what I have been talking about mostly. It is every experiential subject drawn into one cosmic process of consciousness. It is the collective consciousness that partakes in all experiences and thus values the order of them. The primordial nature is the realm of eternal objects. So if you've forgotten what eternal objects are, they are the potentialities for the future. Eternal objects are ingressed into actual entities so that they can realize the potentialities of the future and make a choice. The primordial nature of God is unconscious and transcendent. As I've mentioned, eternal objects exist outside of space and time because they are potentialities, not actualities. The primordial nature of God is not conscious because to Whitehead, consciousness, a high-grade form of experience, is the feeling of contrast between fact and potentiality. And since the primordial nature is nothing but potentiality, it cannot be conscious. So the consequent nature of God, which is the conscious nature, has access to the primordial nature, which is the infinite realm of eternal objects. And it is his job to provide the cosmos with these potentialities to keep causality running in order. The consequent nature of God alone is not enough, because without the primordial nature, the cosmos would not be aware of potentiality, and thus there would be no subjective aim in nature. The universe would be stuck in a static state. Okay, so now I will talk about how humans prehend reality, and then I will finish this off as it is getting rather long. So, because everything contains sentience, there is no absolute distinction between the living and non-living. For Whitehead, the difference between the organic and inorganic is not a fundamental difference, but it's rather only a difference of degree. Now, what we typically call organisms in science, Whitehead calls living societies. He roughly distinguishes living societies as having a high degree of self-sufficiency and more intensive feelings adapted to a variety of experiences. Complex living societies, such as humans, prehend actual entities as abstract wholes rather than a mass plurality of process for ease of comprehension. This process is called transmutation. It eliminates detail and artificially carves reality into bits and pieces. It is necessary for our practical functioning, but is also a large cause of the errors of our substance-based ontology. The individual cells of living societies are flooded with data from their external and physiological environment, and the data is then transmuted into abstractions for ease of comprehension. The more complex living societies have an organ of central control in which the flood of data is streamlined into. In humans and other animals, it is the brain. Thus, the brain is not the producer of sentience, but rather it streamlines a mass plurality of sentience into a mode of experience that is practical for the survival of our species, but not so practical for metaphysics or what we so-called mystical experience. Though, interestingly enough, sometimes this organ of central control lapses, causing us to develop things such as multiple personality disorder, and, in theory, we could also prehend the direct experiences of other societies. Now, rewinding back to when we talked about the two main types of prehension, positive and negative prehensions, negative prehensions are the exclusions of perceptions of reality. Along with our process of transmutation, they give us our limited perspective of reality. Without transmutation or negative prehensions, we would experience the entirety of reality in its complex nature, all the way from actual entities to the consequent nature of God, and even every possible potentiality of the universe. It would be terribly overwhelming and painful.
Whitehead began with the idea that all experience comes from what he referred to as objective occurrences, that is, instances of experience that come into being, reach satisfaction, or what he calls concrescence, and then perish. The idea is that these individual experiences, tiny, shall we say, subatomic experiences, come into being, evolve to a state of satisfaction, and then die, leave some sort of physical, or what he calls prehension, behind them, such that other experiences which come into being afterward are affected by its movement towards satisfaction. Large accumulations of these experiences aggregate to form societies. Societies can move in either one of two ways. If they are very rapid instances, that is, instances that come into being, concress or are satisfied within the given society and then are not prehended, that is, they come into being and then they immediately perish without prehension or without understanding, then these are the experiences that form material objects, largely inanimate objects. If, on the other hand, there are societies that are formed amongst all of these experiences that come into being, they maybe do not have such an incredibly short or transient move to concrescence or satisfaction, and then perish and are prehended or understood by other, or affect other experiences that come into being afterward, they are intelligent, and they are for mental societies, and therefore they can give rise to animate objects. Societies that the more densely a society is packed, shall we say, or the denser the created society, the closer and closer and closer that such movements towards to concrescence and then prehension can form consciousness. In that way, Whitehead served to counteract a lot of the theories of evolutionary biologists who came to think that intelligence was largely an accident. It was also Whitehead's way of taking Bergson's idea of creative evolution and making it putting logical axioms to his ideas of the development of creativity and development of mental processes. One can see from this idea that Whitehead develops that societies of experience lend themselves to life in general. That is, life is not a deterministic process. That is, a process that is governed by static laws of physics or economics or mathematics, for instance, but is inherently creative. And this lent itself greatly to the philosophies of pragmatism that at that time were beginning to flourish in the early 20th century in the United States, and established Whitehead's cosmology in specific as being central. And this is he's not often given the credit for being one of the main metaphysicians of pragmatism, but is one of the core concepts within pragmatism, and gave it its metaphysical foundation. So, given the idea that such societies evolve, and that certain events come into being, one must understand that in every entity's movement towards satisfaction is not the same. Even though he gives a very atomistic view, each of these experiences is governed by its environment. How does one achieve satisfaction? How does one achieve concrescence? And the way in which it's achieved determines the movement of the society or grouping of experiences in total. There must be something. There must be a repository of possibilities. As is inherent, it makes sense. There must also be an ultimate repository of prehension. All of these experiences, if they are to become mental, and ultimately mental in their aggregation, must have some reservoir of understanding, and that reservoir is called God.